While nerfs may be common in other competitive video games, Pokémon is not one of these games. As a matter of fact, prior to Pokémon Champions, nerfs would only really occur between generations. While a Pokémon or move might be broken in Generation 7, it would then be retuned to be a little bit more balanced in Generation 8 or 9. If I recall correctly, we've never actually seen a Pokémon get their stats or move pool nerfed with just a balance patch update. We have seen some new abilities and moves be introduced into Pokemon's toolkits through DLC. However, nerfs are something very, very rare in competitive Pokemon, and what I want to talk about today are just a few nerfs that have happened in the history of the game. These are nerfs that might affect top tier Pokemon, or nerfs that might just affect really annoying Pokemon, but they needed it anyways. I'm looking at you, Chansey. But yeah, let's talk about nerfs in competitive Pokemon. Let me know if you guys want to see a buff video at any point. There's a lot of buffs that happen too. Just a lot of buffs, actually. They really love buffing Pokemon in this franchise. Let's just get right into it. If you guys enjoy, leave a like, subscribe, check out the Patreon, become a YouTube channel member, hype the video, all of that. And hey, you definitely want to subscribe because at 300,000 subscribers, I'll be ranking every bench in Lumio City. Let's just begin. I think we need to start off with the probably most famous nerf of all time, and that has to be the nerf to Parental Bond. Mega Kangaskhan is a Pokemon which has a pretty phenomenal stat spread and a great ability in Parental Bond. Parental Bond would cause Mega Kangaskhan's little son to pop out of his pouch and just go ahead and start hitting you like the little ankle biter he is. This extra hit on every single target move would cause Mega Kangaskhan to deal an extra 50% damage on top of whatever damage they've already done, and making their move into a multi-hit move, meaning that it would bypass focus sashes. Parental Bond doing 50% more damage was inherently very strong, as it made it so all of your moves kind of had a choice band attached to them. This is kind of crazy coming off of Mega Kangaskhan's frankly impressive base 125 attack stat. It just gets skyrocketed as soon as you account for the built-in choice band known as Junior. But what really put Mega Kangaskhan over the edge was its access to the move Power Up Punch. Power Up Punch was a fighting type 40 base power physical attack, which would always grant the user +1 attack. The issue is that Mega Kangaskhan was able to use the move twice in a single turn, meaning not only would it deal super effective damage to Steel-type Pokemon, and pretty decent chip damage to everything else, but it would also just boost its attack by 2 stages. That is a Swords Dance that does damage. I don't think there's any other move in the game that does that. Mega Kangaskhan was obviously quite strong, and it was really overrepresented in the 2015 World Championships top cut. Due to this overrepresentation in the metagame, Mega Kangaskhan ended up being nerfed in Generation 7, where it lost access to Power Up Punch, and also had Parental Bond nerfed to only be a 25% boost in damage to the moves that it used. Mega Kangaskhan definitely deserved this nerf, as Scrappy would go on to be buffed in later generations, making it immune to Intimidate on lead. And that is important because if Mega Kangaskhan did not receive this nerf, I think it would be even stronger than it already is in Pokemon Champions. This channel is partnered with Gamersupps. If you want to support my work and get great tasting drinks, you can order Gamersupps through my link in the description down below, or with code Moxie boosted at checkout for 10% off. Gamersupps is a caffeinated product that I recommend only to my 18+ viewers, but my link will send you to their caffeine-free product section just in case. Every product purchased through my link supports my channel financially, so I'd really appreciate the support. Now back to the video. Another famous Gen 6 Pokemon that received a pretty notable nerf was Talonflame. Talonflame is a Pokemon with an impressive 126 base speed stat and basically nothing else. The rest of those stats are pretty garbage. But it doesn't need to have great stats when it has a broken ability. Talonflame had the ability Gale Wings. In Generation 6, this granted all flying type moves +1 priority. This meant priority Tailwind, priority Brave Bird, and priority Roost. In singles, this meant that Talonflame loved to use bulk up sets with practically no speed investment and would just boost its stats to the moon, go for Roost when it needed to, and then Brave Bird with priority, making it the strongest priority move in the game at 120 base power with Stab. In doubles, Talonflame was just as strong because it was a really great offensive and support Pokemon who didn't need to invest in speed at all really, while being able to give its partner Pokemon priority Tailwind and being able to spread burns with Will-O-Wisp and once again deal major damage with Brave Bird. Now, they managed to nerf Talonflame in a way that was actually really clever. As of Generation 7 and onwards, Talonflame's ability Gale Wings now only gives it priority to flying type moves if it's at max HP. This is really clever as it makes it so Talonflame's ability is practically useless if it gets faked out, hit by sand chip damage, a sucker punch, anything, and if it uses Brave Bird, it will take recoil damage and not have priority on any subsequent moves. This has caused Talonflame players to have to adjust their playstyle quite a bit and actually invest in speed to guarantee that Talonflame is still able to give the partner Pokemon Tailwind if it needs to. This also has led to modern Talonflames dropping Brave Bird for other options such as Hurricane, Air Slash, or most notably Dual Wing Beat, a 40 base power physical flying type move that hits twice. This heavily cut Talonflame's damage output and for a while left people thinking that Talonflame might be broadly useless, but it still managed to have a place in the metagame in Generation 7 and even Generation 9, where it was a very solid part of a Regulation C hyper offense team. Yeah, it was a really good nerf. It actually just made Talonflame a lot more swag, in my opinion. I feel weird using swag as a metric for how good a nerf is, but I think it's actually pretty appropriate. In Generation 8, Chansey lost access to the move Minimize. I'm gonna let you guys know something. You might be wondering, why does it matter that Chansey lost Minimize? And I've talked about Minimize Chansey in a lot of videos, so I don't want to talk your ear off about the same Pokemon over and over again, but this is probably the last time for a while we'll talk about Minimize Chansey. Minimize Chansey is the devil.
It's me, the devil. I love you.
Minimize Chansey would use Chansey with an Eviolite to boost its very low defenses as high as it can, while partnering it with a guard split Pokemon like Carbink or Shuckle to boost those defenses even more so. By giving it this major defense boost on top of the Eviolite, it would make it so Chansey was one of the most difficult Pokemon to KO in the game, bar none. Because it's a guard split boost, not even things like Sacred Swords or crits would bypass this boost in bulk. It would then use Toxic to stall out your team, and the thing is, it wasn't necessarily the guard split that made this Chansey terrifying, it was the fact that it would go on to set up Minimizes. Minimize is a move which would grant Chansey +2 evasion every time it used it, maximizing at +6 where you might as well just quit the game, you're not hitting the Chansey. Having that high of bulk while also just avoiding all damage outright made Chansey just a real pain to play against. Being a normal type meant it also only had one weakness, so there were very few ways to deal with the Chansey, as Chansey stall teams would effectively cover for every option that you might have. If you had Perish Song to just KO the Chansey, they would skill swap Soundproof from Mr. Mime. If you had Toxic to stall out the Chansey, they would skill swap Magikarp from Reuniclus. It seemed like they just had an answer to everything. But if you had two of those answers, then you win, congratulations. But if you don't have any of those answers, well, you just get to roll the dice. You just get to see if you manage to hit that Chansey. Chansey teams would hold up tournaments for a really long time, as they would go to timer every single round. Because of this, it's no wonder that Game Freak made the decision to just get rid of Minimize on Chansey. Chansey no longer even has access to that move. Can it still do the guard split shenanigans? Yes, but it's no longer carried by not taking any damage most turns of the game. A very deserving nerf, if I do say so myself. Thundurus is a Pokemon who has seen high competitive usage since its release back in Generation 5. Generation 5, it was actually a menace though, because it was able to spam Thunder Wave, cutting every Pokemon's speed by a quarter, and also having the chance to fully paralyze things outright. Thundurus was one of the greatest support Pokemon in Generation 5, and while this was only discovered way deep into Generation 5's lifespan, it did end up carrying on into other generations. Luckily for us, Thundurus got nerfed. Well, not so much Thundurus as much as its best move, Thunder Wave. Thunder Wave was a 100% accurate move that would cause the target Pokemon to get paralyzed. This is especially powerful as it allows for you to have really good speed control and let your other Pokemon move first, or you can just roll the dice and hope that the other Pokemon doesn't move at all. The RNG actually is just a nightmare sometimes, especially when you pair it with Rock Slide. I love this game. I love this game so much. This is the best game ever made. This is the best game. I love this game. Going into Generation 6, Game Freak made the smart decision, which honestly probably should have been the design from the start, to make it so electric types could not get paralyzed. This is a huge nerf, as now there was a whole type of Pokemon Thundurus wasn't able to paralyze. But they went even further in Generation 7, where they nerfed Thunder Wave's accuracy from 100% to 90%, making it far less effective, and reducing the speed drop that paralysis would cause from 1/4 to only 1/2, making it far more easy to play around. I really don't have much else to say about this. I hate Thunder Wave, and it's really annoying, and I'm really glad that they changed it. You know, let's stick with statuses. This is a nerf that happened in Pokemon Champions specifically. Sleep is a status condition which has been integral to competitive Pokemon for a very long time and gave a lot of Pokemon their identities such as Amoonguss, Venusaur, Milotic, and various other very annoying Pokemon that you really just don't want to have to face in a tournament. Now, Sleep has been reworked a number of times, like in Generation 5 where switching out would reset the Sleep counter, or in Generation 6 where they went back and fixed that. But Pokemon Champions made a pretty drastic nerf to Sleep. Sleep will now only last a maximum of 2 turns. This means that on the turn a Pokemon falls asleep, they have one turn where they will not wake up, and then the next turn they have a chance to wake up, and then on the following turn they are guaranteed to wake up. This is a pretty drastic change to Sleep, as previously Sleep could be up to 3 turns. That 3-turn Sleep was something that could win entire games, but now knowing that you are guaranteed to wake up either this turn or the next turn allows for people to play a lot more effectively into Pokemon like Amoonguss or Coil Hypnosis Milotic. I guess since we're still on statuses, I should talk about Sneasler. Sneasler is a really annoying Pokemon that no one really enjoyed facing up until Pokemon Champions. Some might argue that you still don't like facing it in Pokemon Champions because it's probably the best Pokemon in the game right now. That being said, you're really lucky that you're facing this Sneasler and not Generation 9 Sneasler. In Generation 9, Sneasler's signature move Dire Claw, an 80 base power physical poison type attack, had a 50% chance to status the opponent. Which status? Who knows? It could be either sleep, paralysis, or poison. And you really hoped that it would be poison because if it was paralysis or sleep, you could lose the game outright. This Pokemon was so powerful in certain regulations, such as Regulation H, that it led to Pokemon like Electabuzz and Magmar finding a niche as Follow Me users, as their abilities played really well into Sneasler, with Magmar and Electabuzz both having the ability Vital Spirit, preventing them from falling asleep if they wanted to redirect a Dire Claw into them, and Electabuzz being especially good at this as not only did it have Vital Spirit, but it was also an electric type, meaning it could not get paralyzed. This meant that Electabuzz would only ever get poisoned if it did get statused when it was facing Sneasler. Sneasler was a Pokemon who could just cheese games by just spamming Dire Claw. There were a lot of endgames where your best win condition was, hey, you know what, this close combat isn't KOing, and I could go for a crit, but if I go for the Dire Claw, I could just sleep them or paralyze them and then play for that. It was a really frustrating Pokemon to deal with, and it was just stupidly strong. In Pokemon Champions, Dire Claw has been nerfed to only have a 30% chance to status the opponent. This is huge as it's no longer a, hey, it's like 50-50 if I sleep them type of move. You can't really fish for a cheese endgame anymore. Yes, this is your best win con in certain scenarios, but a lot more people are more inclined to go for the close combat crit than spam Dire Claw game to game, because Dire Claw was just that broken back in the day. You could just fish for wins. Like, people really did not enjoy facing Sneasler back in Generation 9. Let's stick with another Pokemon Champions nerf, and one that I had been asking for a very long time. In many videos I've made talking about the Pokemon Urshifu, I pointed out how ridiculously broken the Pokemon is from a conceptual level. Not only do these Pokemon have guaranteed crits on their signature moves, but their ability Unseen Fist makes it so all contact moves will hit through Protect for full damage. This is especially baffling when you consider the fact that back in Generation 7, Z moves wouldn't even hit through Protect for full damage. Z moves would hit through Protect for quarter damage. Going up against Urshifu Rapid Strike especially was really difficult, as there wasn't a lot of counterplay to the damage it would do to you. If you intimidated it, Surging Strikes would just crit through the Intimidate and deal a lot of damage. If you set up light screens, Surging Strikes would crit through the screens and deal damage. If you decide to Protect into it, Surging Strikes would hit through the Protect and deal damage. Having a Pokemon that could just guarantee toss out a move that might one-shot half your team is really frustrating and really just shouldn't exist in a competitive game. There were ways around it. There were Pokemon who had abilities like Shell Armor, such as Hisui and Gudra, but that Pokemon was weak to fighting, so it wasn't a great answer to Urshifu, nor did it have Redirection, so it wasn't actually a Pokemon that could defend the rest of your team. They also went on to remove the move Lucky Chant in Generation 8, the same generation that Urshifu was added. Lucky Chant would prevent crits, meaning that it was actually counterplay to Urshifu. It is a ridiculously powerful Pokemon, but while it isn't in Pokemon Champions, its ability is. Unseen Fist is the ability of Mega Golurk, and it has been nerfed. Now, Unseen Fist, get this, will only cause the user to deal a quarter damage through Protect. Thank you, Game Freak. You got my letters. I really appreciate it. This is really huge because now there's actually counterplay to Urshifu. The ability isn't bad now. I mean, Urshifu is still going to hit you through Protect. Golurk is still going to hit you through Protect. But now Protect is a defensive maneuver that works in certain situations. You're no longer concerned that you're going to get KO'd through the Protect, as it's a quarter damage. That's like using a bug type move into Heatran. It's the same kind of damage you're doing there. I think we should talk about these ones as a pair. I want to talk about Snorlax and Mimikyu. Before I talk about them, we need to talk about how well they work together in Generation 7. In Generation 7 VGC, Snorlax and Mimikyu were a very iconic duo that paired with each other super well, as Mimikyu was a ghost fairy type with the ability Disguise. Disguise caused Mimikyu to not take any damage on the first turn that it was hit, and then the Disguise would break, allowing for Mimikyu to actually take damage. Pairing this with a Focus Sash or a Mental Herb made it so Mimikyu was a very reliable Trick Room setter, as it couldn't take damage on the first turn, could block a taunt with its Mental Herb, and was a ghost type so it couldn't be faked out. Snorlax loved being next to Mimikyu because Snorlax was able to take advantage of its ability Gluttony alongside the newly buffed Pinch Berries in Generation 7. These berries included the Figgy Berry, a Guava Berry, and many others, but these berries would heal you for 50% health if you were at 25% health or lower. Snorlax would use Belly Drum with a Pinch Berry and the ability Gluttony to drop down to 50% health, maximize its attack stat, and then heal back up to full. From that point on, it would click the move Return to one-shot virtually every Pokemon in the game. You can see how this is a very scary combo, as you have to direct a lot of your attention onto Mimikyu to prevent the Trick Room outright, but if you attack the Mimikyu, Snorlax is free to Belly Drum up. And if you attack into the Snorlax while it protects, and the Mimikyu gets the Trick Room up, then you just end up at the same situation and you lose the match. This is a very powerful duo in Generation 7, and they both got nerfed going into Generation 8. Starting with Mimikyu, Mimikyu had its ability Disguise nerfed to make it so, on the turn the Disguise gets broken, Mimikyu doesn't take direct damage from the move, but the act of the Disguise breaking causes Mimikyu to take a small amount of chip damage. This removes the Focus Sash as a viable item from Mimikyu's repertoire because it will now never actually activate. This means that the Focus Sash Mental Herb 50-50 as to whether you want to double into it or taunt is a lot more playable, as doubling into Mimikyu will basically always KO it if you have the right Pokemon. Snorlax got nerfed in two very major ways. One, it got the Pinch Berries nerfed as a whole. Pinch Berries were really busted in Generation 7, and they caused games to last virtually forever. A lot of teams were extremely bulky and had multiple Pinch Berries, meaning that games would last for a super long time as Pokemon just had absurd longevity. Pinch Berries as of Generation 8 would only heal the user for 33% of their health instead of 50%. A huge nerf, as now Snorlax wouldn't be able to get back up to full health after belly drumming. And on top of that, Snorlax lost access to the move Return, which was removed from the game outright. Return was a normal type attack that would cap at 102 base power if the Pokemon was at max friendship with the user. Its alternative of Frustration, which would cap at 102 base power if the Pokemon had 0 friendship with the user, was also removed from the game. This meant that Snorlax was forced to click the 85 base power move Body Slam, which didn't deal nearly as much damage as Return would at +6 attack, or it would have to use Double Edge, a move which is stronger than Return, but would cause Snorlax to take recoil damage, enough so that it wasn't really worth running in Generation 8. Snorlax really struggled to do anything for the entirety of Generation 8 despite getting a Gigantamax form, and while Mimikyu did receive this massive nerf, it was still a pretty powerful Pokemon going forward. I want to talk about one more nerf in this video. There's actually a lot of nerfs that happened in competitive Pokemon, but I don't have enough time to get this video out in time if I talk about all of them, so we will be doing a part 2 at some point in the future. But I want to talk about Zacian and Zamazenta's huge nerf that they received in Generation 9. In Generation 8, Zacian and Zamazenta were the box legendaries of Pokemon Sword and Shield, and they had absurd stats at the expense of having to hold a specific held item. Zacian would gain this massive stat boost if it held the Rusted Sword, and Zamazenta would gain the same stat boost if it held the Rusted Shield. On top of this, they both had really powerful abilities, with Zamazenta gaining a +1 defense boost every time it switched onto the field, and Zacian gaining a +1 attack boost every time it switched onto the field. When you stack that attack boost with Zacian's absurd attack stat of 170, and also take into account that it is a Fairy Steel type, the hypothetical best type in the game offensively and to an extent defensively, Zacian was of course a bit of a problem Pokemon, with it being kind of the objective correct choice for multiple restricted teams in the later formats of Pokemon Sword and Shield. Zamazenta was never quite as strong, and it was really only seen as like a partner to Groudon, and it was like a coaching user to give Groudon attack and defense boosts, so it wasn't the best Pokemon. Despite this, they both got nerfed in Generation 9. In Generation 9, Zacian not only received a stat nerf of 150 attack in its crowned form rather than 170, but now Intrepid Sword and Dauntless Shield would only activate once per game. This meant that leading off Zacian into Incineroar was basically guaranteeing that you would never see that attack boost. You had to think through when you wanted to send out Zacian a lot more, and that huge damage nerf made it so Zacian wasn't really even considered one of the top tiers in Generation 9's restricted formats. It would really only be seen next to Regidrago teams, as the combination of a Fairy Steel type with Regidrago's Dragon Energy was a really good combo, as Zacian could remove Fairy types like Fluttermane from the opponent's side of the field, allowing for a Regidrago to clean up afterwards. Zamazenta would also receive a bit of a stat nerf, as its 145 defenses would be dropped to just 140, and while this might seem a little bit unfair, in the long run it ended up being the right choice, as in Generation 9 Zamazenta would gain access to Body Press, a move which deals damage based on the user's defense stat. If Zamazenta could have that defense boost from Dauntless Shield every single time it switched onto the field, we'd be dealing with a whole different beast than we were in Generation 9. Zamazenta was already considered one of the best restricted Pokemon in the game, and if it got that boost every single time, I'm not sure I'd even want to play that format competitively. But those were just a few nerfs in competitive Pokemon. I just want to talk about them. We're definitely going to have a sequel video to this, as there are a lot of nerfs I could talk about, but I thought this would be a fun video for this week. If you guys enjoyed, leave a like, subscribe, turn notifications, do all the things where you check out my Patreon or whatever. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.